A mysterious visitor has appeared in our solar system. From far away, another star sent a strange object our way, which astronomers have named 3I Atlas. What is it? An ordinary comet, or a controlled spaceship from an extraterrestrial civilization? This is the opinion of the well-known astrophysicist Avi Loeb. And will this mysterious guest meet our planet Earth? Let's find out. Astrophysicists have found signs of a controlled spaceship in an interstellar object. My friends, every time a foreign interstellar object appears in our solar system, and this time, we've already noticed the third one, the American astrophysicist Avi Loeb presents it to us like a detective novel. On July 1st, 2025, the third interstellar object was registered. We have already talked about it as well. This is 3I Atlas. So, what is unusual about this third object? First of all, fortunately, it was discovered quite far from the Sun, near Jupiter's orbit, even a little beyond. This is unusual. Comets generally don't like to reveal themselves so far from the Sun. It's cold out there, and they don't evaporate. But apparently, if this is a comet, let's emphasize, because Avi Loeb insists it's not a comet, most astronomers still think it is. So, if it is a comet, it must be large, since the telescope can see it, meaning the object is big enough to reflect sunlight and be visible through a telescope. Secondly, the strange tail that appeared on this comet might not be a tail at all. This was noted by Avi Loeb and his English colleagues, who published an article about it. We will provide a link to it. It might be a random photographic effect. Maybe it's not a tail, but just an image stretched because the object itself was moving, causing a slight blur in the photo. What is the size of this object? We don't know for sure. If it's not a comet, then it's quite a large body, big enough to reflect a lot of sunlight with its surface about 20 kilometers in diameter. But if it is a comet, and it has already warmed enough to start evaporating, it surrounds itself with a cloud of gas, a temporary atmosphere we call a coma. In that case, its effective size appears to increase. In reality, the solid body itself could be smaller, as little as 1–2 kilometers. For now, this is unclear, since it's still far away. What other feature alerted the American-British group? I'd even call them fantasists, though in my opinion, any good science fiction is worth talking about. So, let me list them. First, the orbital plane, or rather, the direction from which this celestial body entered, almost exactly matches the plane in which the planets of our solar system move. All the planets move approximately in the same plane, just like our Earth. We call it the plane of the ecliptic. Now, the orbit of the incoming body, I'll refer to it as Atlas, lies almost entirely in this plane. It gives the impression that this object wants to meet the planets of our solar system. Well, the angle is almost 5. The probability of such an alignment is quite small. It was at roughly this small angle that the object entered our system. The second feature, it came in the opposite direction to the rotation of all the planets in the solar system. All the planets and the Sun as well, by the way, rotate counterclockwise when viewed from the North Pole, while this object entered clockwise, essentially heading straight into the oncoming motion of the planets. But combined with the fact that it's moving almost in the same plane as the planets, this is indeed a highly unlikely event. Many people know about Comet Swift-Tuttle, which approaches Earth only once every 133 years. But not everyone realizes that we see the trail of its tail every year. At the end of summer, there is always a wave of news about the Perseids, a spectacular meteor shower, known to the public as a shooting star display. In fact, the Perseids are formed from the trail of dust particles left behind by Comet Swift-Tuttle. This year, the peak of the meteor shower will occur on the night of August 12th to 13th. You can observe this event until the end of August, so head out somewhere away from light pollution and enjoy the meteor display. I'm quoting the astrophysicists directly here. A close flyby of 3 planets lies ahead for this object. In just the next 2.5 months, in August, September, and October, this body, which is moving very fast at a speed of 60 kilometers per second, will pass very close to Mars. It has probably already passed by Jupiter just in the last few days. Fairly close, not close enough to hit Jupiter, but still quite near, and very close to Mars. So even the satellites currently orbiting Mars will be able to photograph it for us. Although their optics aren't very large, the encounter will be very tight. And then, if it wants to, and this is important to say, if this object is not natural but actually a spacecraft controlled by someone, it could use the flybys of Jupiter and Mars to perform a maneuver. This is called a gravitational slingshot. That is, under the influence of the gravity of the planet you are flying past, you can slightly change the trajectory of your further movement and be able to pass by Venus. Why would they want to pass by Venus? Here's why. After that maneuver, they can also get closer to the Sun. We already know about such things. Right now, the Parker spacecraft is flying and scheduled to approach the Sun to study its inner corona. So, it has deliberately flown past Venus several times, which slowed it down and threw it closer to the Sun. We know how to perform such maneuvers too. No need to be impressed just because these extrasolar visitors can do it. Their spaceship is repeating what we have already learned to do, if it is indeed a spaceship, as Avi Loeb and his colleagues suggest. So, if all this works out, if it's all planned, then this very alien won't fly out of the solar system like ʻOumuamua and Comet Borisov, but will stay within it. Gravitational maneuvers can not only speed up and change the direction of flight, but they can also slow it down. It depends on how you fly and which direction you choose. But why would it want to enter a near-solar orbit? The thing is, moving in the plane of the ecliptic, this cosmic visitor could potentially encounter Earth. And here is where real science fiction begins. In the scientific article, The Dark Forest by Liu Cixin is mentioned explicitly. Who remembers the Chinese sci-fi novel by the now famous writer Liu Cixin? And the Fermi paradox, where are they? Here they are. If and that's a big if this is an artificial object, honestly, by manipulating these quite scientific facts and assuming the object is not natural but artificial, one can indeed suppose that these gravitational maneuvers are planned in order to later approach our planet. By the way, if this is a natural object, then we're out of luck. Not only will it not come close to Earth, but it will pass so far from our planet that astronomers will have a hard time studying it. It will pass near the Sun at the moment when Earth is on the opposite side of the Sun, and the Sun's glare will blind us, making it impossible to study the object properly. But if it intends to meet Earth, then we have to wait until roughly the end of November and the beginning of December this year that meeting might happen. Very interesting. Avi Loeb himself and his colleagues say that this is a training, didactic exercise, that through this, they are essentially demonstrating the capabilities of computational astronomy. What calculations can be done to predict the movement of a celestial object if it is artificial? Yes, this is a good educational exercise, but it might also turn out to be the correct strategy for an interstellar visitor for an artificial object. Just a few days left, maybe a couple of weeks until the observation results are processed and published, so we can understand whether it's a comet or an artificial object. If it's a comet, there will be a tail, a coma, and a normal uncontrolled flight. And I'll add a little bit of a sci-fi twist myself. And if it's an artificial object that doesn't need to masquerade as a comet, it could very well surround itself with a gas coma, a kind of envelope. It might even eject a gas plasma tail. But who knows what kind of military tricks we aren't aware of, like deploying smoke screens and so on. So, we will need to take a close look to determine whether this really is a comet or actually an alien spacecraft disguised as one. The object 3I Atlas is far from the first that Avi Loeb suspects to have an artificial extraterrestrial origin. It's impossible not to agree that each of the three interstellar objects that have entered the solar system in recent years has many unusual features. Let me remind you, in 2017, scientists recorded an interstellar object within the solar system for the first time. The certainty that it is not from here, but came from afar, is based on the speed at which it is traveling. The thing is, the Sun, of course, is a massive body, but it cannot hold onto objects moving too fast nearby. Those that belong to us move at moderate speeds. And if a cosmic object is approaching us from afar, one that has never belonged to the solar system, it can fly in at any speed from tens to hundreds of kilometers per second. The Sun won't be able to hold it. It will rush past and head out into the vastness of the galaxy. Exactly such an object flew in back in 2017, and you probably know it. Remember ʻOumuamua? This word is quickly remembered by all astronomy enthusiasts. ʻOumuamua was the first interstellar object discovered in 2017. It was full of mysteries. First of all, it was unclear where it came from, why it was the first, and why astronomers had never detected anything like it before 2017. And secondly, as it was leaving, it seemed to activate a jet engine and slightly accelerate. American astrophysicist Avi Loeb noticed all of this. He is actually a very good astrophysicist. He works at Harvard and even leads the astrophysics department, but he became so intrigued by the unusual properties of the first interstellar object that he gathered all the data and presented it as a mystery. In general, in science, a mystery is a very good stimulus for research. Unfortunately, we discovered this object late. It was flying toward Earth from the direction of the sun, and astronomers don't like to point their telescopes at the sun because it blinds them. And we noticed it only after it had zoomed past Earth and was already leaving the solar system. So, there was no chance to catch up with it, and there was also very little time to study it. But we did learn some things. First of all, it had an unusual shape a few hundred meters long and several tens of meters thick. It looked like it had a cigar-like form. In other words, it resembled a spaceship, like the ones depicted in science fiction movies. Secondly, it actually moved contrary to Newton's laws. When it flew past the sun, it gained extra speed. Yes, the sun's gravity was slowing it down, but it was as if it had turned on rocket engines to accelerate its flight. However, if those were engines, we would have noticed exhaust gas coming out of the rocket motor, but there was no such thing. And in general, it didn't resemble a comet, which evaporates and ejects gases from its surface like a jet stream. This was a typical asteroid, but not entirely typical. Out of the 1.5 million asteroids discovered in the solar system, none had ever had such a cigar-like shape, and yet this first one, arriving from afar, already possessed this strange form. Avi Loeb suggested that it was an artificial object. It might have been a spacecraft, or perhaps space debris that accidentally entered our solar system from another planetary system. You know, honestly, I had a hunch that it wasn't just debris. Its trajectory was very strange. It flew past all the solar system's planets, entered inside Mercury's orbit close enough to avoid being scorched by the sun's rays, yet close enough to recharge its batteries with solar panels. That is, it seemed as though its trajectory had been calculated in advance. Avi Loeb noticed this as well. Only 2 years later, in 2019, the first interstellar comet was discovered. This was a point of pride for the Sternberg Astronomical Institute because it was discovered by one of its staff members, Comet Borisov. Now, this comet is known as Borisov's Comet, and it already had the second interstellar designation. That's why we write it like this. 1I, the first interstellar object, is ʻOumuamua. 2I, the second interstellar, is Borisov's comet. Then the years went by. We waited quite a while, but although it seemed like we should be finding new objects almost every 2 years, none appeared for a full 6 years. And finally, on July 1st, 2025, the third interstellar object, 3I, Atlas, was detected. Enthralled by the idea that ʻOumuamua was an artificial object, Avi Loeb went further. He suggested that such objects had flown in before. We had simply failed to notice them. In fact, it's a reasonable assumption. We still don't monitor the entire sky, and only now are we learning to do so with robotic telescopes. Look of the 3 celestial objects that have come to us from afar. 2 were discovered by robots, and the third was discovered by astronomer Borisov with the homemade telescope. Frankly, this is something of an embarrassment for professional astronomy. We tend to miss quite a lot, but Loeb decided to check whether there might have been such objects in the past. And what did he do? He gathered data from meteor patrols. Meteor patrols are cameras that constantly photograph the sky and monitor meteors. If a meteor is recorded by several cameras placed far apart, it's possible to reconstruct a 3D, volumetric portrait of the meteor's flight, calculate its trajectory, and determine, first, where it came from and, second, where it fell. Among the many meteor trails, Avi Loeb found one that showed a very high flight speed. And, as I've already mentioned, objects don't travel at such high speeds within the solar system. It's like a car going around a curve. If it doesn't slow down, it'll fly off the road. If a space object moves too fast, the sun won't be able to hold it. So, in the old records of meteor patrols, there was one track meaning the path of a meteor through Earth's atmosphere that was moving at a very high speed and was most likely interstellar. Then Avi Loeb took things further. If such objects have been entering Earth's atmosphere regularly, why not look for their traces here on Earth? Yes, mostly they burn up in the atmosphere, but if the body is large enough, it can fall and be preserved. The track that Avi Loeb discovered led him to conclude that a fragment of this meteorite body might have fallen into the Indian Ocean. The approximate location was calculated. Avi Loeb found funding, secured sponsors, chartered a small vessel, and went, or rather sailed, as sailors would say, to the spot in the ocean where the celestial object was believed to have fallen. There, he began a special dredging operation using magnetic equipment to search for any metallic magnetic fragments of the meteorite. Generally speaking, meteorites are always magnetic. Iron meteorites, especially, and even stony ones, are quite magnetic, much more than our earthly rocks. They contain about 5-6 iron. But if it was a spaceship, there should definitely be metals there. Although, aluminum is not magnetic. In any case, Avi Loeb found small metallic spherules on the bottom of the Indian Ocean. When this celestial body flew at high speed through the Earth's atmosphere and heated up, it partially evaporated. As physicists say, surface ablation occurred, evaporation of the surface, turning it into tiny metal droplets that fell along the trajectory to the ocean floor. The composition of this metal is strange. At least, that's what Avi Loeb claims. And he's trying to prove it, though not everyone believes him. Sometimes he's a bit too hyperactive and tends to take wishful thinking for reality. But overall, he knows his science. Not all meteorite experts are convinced that this is something unusual. They say iron meteorites of this composition do exist. Well, Avelp argues that this is a rare composition, a rare combination of metals in these small metallic spheres, which indicates not only their extraterrestrial origin, but also their extrasolar origin, that this body came to us from another planetary system, where the composition of meteorites, or maybe the metal from which spacecraft are made, is different. His initiative in the search for extraterrestrial extrasolar objects has gone this far. It's remarkable. The man didn't stop halfway, but developed the story to its logical conclusion. And now, many people have become fascinated with this direction of research.